Good morning. Good morning. It is morning, and you are here for your last day to hang out with 15,000 of your favorite e-commerce friends from around the world. I'm Bob Schwartz, and I'm going to be your tour guide for this session, and this is Nick Black, and we will talk about marketplace strategy, marketplace technology, and what you need to know. We're going to interrogate Nick and see what we can get out of this.
That's right.
First, I want to just give you a little bit about my background and Nick's background so you know who the people that are up here talking. I've got a really long bio, and it's hard to do. When people read it, it's a snoozer. So I decided, I was in Australia, and it was done a different way. And so I'm going to bring up two young ladies who introduced me at a keynote in Australia.
Mr. Bob Schwartz has done a lot of stuff with business and is a really cool dude. He founded Nordstrom.com, which Mum says sells fancy pants stuff. He's on the board of Marketplacer, who make marketplaces. Apparently, marketplaces are so hot right now.
Yeah.
He was president of Magento. Apparently, you might have heard of it. There's a bunch more, but it'll take us too long to read. He's come all the way from California to be here. Dad said there's good mountain biking and surfing in California, but also mountain lions, so I'm not sure if I want to go there. Anyway, please welcome Mr. Bob.
Okay, so that was amazing, right? I show up in Australia and they had that going for me, so that was absolutely amazing. Nick, do you have a video?
I don't think I do I?
No, so last night, I'm sitting there, how am I gonna, I saw that online, and I'm like, I saw that on my deck, I'm like, okay, that'll make it easier. That just happened about 8 months ago in Australia. I'm like, okay, I'll use that. I'm like, okay, for Nick, what am I gonna do? I'm like a high schooler doing my homework in my bedroom last night at about midnight. I'm like, well, how am I gonna do Nick? How do high schoolers do their homework today? ChatGPT. So I went in and I asked ChatGPT, I said, give me a bio on Nick from Chemist Warehouse. Whoops. And Chat came up with something that the Kindle doesn't want to show me. Hold on here. We'll get there. And it said, Nick Blatt is a highly respected and accomplished chemist who currently works at Chemist Warehouse, blah, blah, blah. Whether you're looking for advice on specific medication or simply need help selecting the right vitamins or supplements, Nick is always happy to help. I think it missed it, so I refined it a little bit. I told him something about e-commerce and a couple other things. He says, I like this one. Meet Nick Black, head of e-commerce and digital at Chemist Warehouse. Nick is a seasoned professional with a passion for all things e-commerce and digital. With over a decade of experience in the industry, he's a true expert in the field, but Nick's interests don't stop there. He's also an avid fan of great tattoo artists and loves to collect unique and meaningful tattoos. Whether he's leading the digital strategy at Chemist Warehouse or exploring the latest tattoo trends, Nick is always pushing the boundaries and striving for excellence. Nick, does that sound like you?
Sounds pretty accurate to be honest, Bob.
Give him a little bit more background on that in Chemist Warehouse.
Yeah, no worries. Hi everyone, great to be here today. So I've worked in e-com for about 15 years. Been at Chemist Warehouse a couple of years, leading all things digital marketing, e-com, marketplace strategy, and basically anything that's to do with digital. So Chemist Warehouse, for those that don't know, about 500 stores across the world, one of the leading retailers in Australia, probably the leading pharmacist in Australia, but also a really big and great retailer as well. 500 stores in Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, China, and expanding over time into other areas as well. And we have about 17,000 staff in Australia as well.
It's good. So let me set the stage here. About 7 years ago, I was in Australia. I met the founder of Marketplacer, Jason Wyatt, who's here somewhere. And he came up to me, he said, mate, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to build marketplaces, some of the best marketplaces out there, one on biking, one on et cetera, et cetera. And when I'm doing that, what I'm really going to be doing is building out the best marketplace technology platform for brands. And when we do that, I'm gonna end up rolling that part out. We're gonna build the best company in the world, and I'm gonna call you back, and we're gonna join. I'm vice chairman of Marketplacer. I follow Jason to do this. And when I go through a selection of different types of companies I work with, I look for things that are interesting and different. And to me, it's why we're sitting here, is this whole thing about marketplace technology and marketplace strategy. I truly believe it reminds me when we sat there with 30 people at what was called Varian that we turned into Magento, and for you young people, that is actually now Adobe Commerce. When we sat there, it feels like we're at the same apex where this is the real next level of growth for a merchant and a retailer. So when you're looking, what we want to explore here is the decisioning around that, and we wanted to level set. So when we're talking about marketplaces, we're not talking about feeds necessarily into marketplaces. We're talking about technology that allows you to have third-party sellers very easily on your system to do vertical or expansion across the whole line. We've got customers that are in grocery that are, they've got a huge clientele that are people from India, and in grocery, they have this narrow of spices. They want the whole gamut of spices. They want it to come from the little Indian seller, the little seller out of India, to the biggest and the best out there, and they need a place for that. There is an apparel company, a retailer that I work with from time to time that is thinking about, it's all women's, and they have men's, but men's isn't performing really well. I mean, it's just a tough business, but she wants men's online for her customer to buy for him. And we're talking about this, and this is the best solution for her to experiment and to go much, much deeper in men's without taking on the cost burden, the risk burden, and also to keep supply chain flexibility, right? So, and we've all learned in the last couple of years that supply chain flexibility is tantamount, and it should be part of your strategy. So Nick, you're sitting there, you're a multi-billion-dollar retailer, you got 500 stores, you're kind of going through COVID and et cetera. You've got a lot of priorities on there. Why did this bubble to the top for you?
I think there's probably a couple of reasons, but I think the initial reason was I joined Chemist Warehouse about 18 months ago, and my wife said to me, can you please get me this L'Oreal product? And so I went and had a look in the store, it wasn't there. And so I went and chatted to one of the buyers, and the buyer said to me, oh look, we don't stock that line. We can't fit it into the store. And so it made me think, there is a demand for these things, but when you've got a physical store with only a certain amount of space, you've got to make a decision about what you put in there. So we needed to find a solution to be able to say, how can we sell more stuff to more people, but not take the risk on of the stock and holding the stock, or even more is where we actually put the stock. So that's how we started our marketplace journey, was thinking about, how can we actually stock and extend some of the lines. The other thing is we also, working in a big retailer, you have a lot of existing vendors, suppliers who want to be able to pitch new lines to you. They want to be able to pitch new products, but they don't have the runs on the board for it, and sometimes there's no space for it. So that was another thing we're trying to solve, and I think probably the other one is around how do you get into like big and bulky type products that don't necessarily fit in the store.
Right. So when you started leading into this and started going, what's been the biggest challenge to get this set up, or the new muscle? What I've learned about this is it is a total new muscle.
Yep.
So Marketplacer has done this over and over and over and over again for their own and for clients. And we all have these playbooks out there that are really marketing shtick to have you come download and drop in your email. We actually have a playbook that is megabytes or gigabytes big, that is a spreadsheet that, literally it's like a spreadsheet, but it tells you exactly who to hire, when, but it's different. It reminds me of when just prior to Nordstrom, I had sold a company to Amazon that was doing online. We had to invent everything and figure everything out. It's a new muscle. It's different than traditional commerce. Talk about some of the things.
Yeah, there's probably a few challenges that you think about. So the technical implementation, if you're trying to put that into an old platform, can be quite complex, but that's actually not the hardest bit. The hardest bit is trying to retrofit what is a really new business model into an old business model. So traditionally, you've had buyers who have gone out and sourced products, with minimum sell amounts and getting stuff on, commission, or negotiating based on having to hold the stock. you change your whole business up where you're actually just negotiating on one thing, and that's a commission or a clip on the ticket, which is a very, very different way to retrofit into a business. So it takes a bit of time to get used to. I think the other thing is around, it is a different business model. So the way in which it touches your HR team, your finance team, your accounting, the way you're merchandising is quite different. And you're also working with some different sellers who have different needs compared to what you would as a normal supplier.
Right. And when you went to, if you're looking at this side of the business, what I've learned is it's not like a build and deploy for a whole new e-commerce site, not from the complexity and also not from the cost, right? For you, it was a far fraction of a budget allocation to get that implemented. How was the journey getting it implemented? Not just.
Yeah, I think the marketplace platform and any marketplace kind of platform now is quite easy to connect in if you've got a modern e-commerce platform. We didn't have that, so it was a little bit more complex, but it was able to be done. I think the world is moving towards a more headless kind of environment, and I think it will be a lot easier to connect in the future. But I think, as we talked about, that's not the thing that takes the time. The thing that takes the time is setting up your business processes around it and putting a team together that are doing a really different skill set. You've got to get people that are specialised in marketplaces who are doing your traditional, what you'd call buying, but it's not even buying.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
So, Chemist Warehouse has been around since 1973. You've got a bunch of people who've made the business successful, sourcing the best products, from around the world, getting them at the best pricing and then passing that on to customers. But they have to hold that stock, so they're accountable to what they hold in a distribution centre or a store and how well it sells. The big difference is that you're now going out to source things, but realistically, you're just looking at sales. You don't have to hold that stock. So it's a very different kind of skill set, and you're negotiating on one thing, and that's around commission. The other thing is around, obviously, marketing and co-marketing and things like that, but generally, it's really around, you're not having to buy on consignment. You're not having to, talk about minimum. There's really limited risk. So to try and retrofit that into a normal, what would be a traditional buyer, is a different skill set. You're better off starting and going back and getting someone specialised who's good at negotiating commissions.
That's great. And then when you're looking at your seller side, how do you vet through it? I would assume once people know Chemist Warehouse has a marketplace up there, they're knocking at your door because they want a footprint, or they're knocking at your door anyway.
Yeah, look, we've done some, we announced this at our supplier event that we have every year, and I think the first phase was to get it out to those suppliers that we know who'd want to do range extension, but I think our strategy is quite simple. It's initially starting off with some friendly faces and suppliers and doing range extension. So if you're a L'Oreal, we might carry 6 of your lines, but we don't carry that 7th or 8th. So we're able to test and learn in that space as well. Then the second phase, we'll be looking at kind of completely new categories. So things like fitness equipment, things like apparel, stuff that you'd never fit into a store. And then the third phase, which is probably the more risky one, is where you start to go back and look at your existing categories and get some new brands in there. Now that has its risks, because obviously if you have some really big deals with big suppliers who are selling a lot of product through your stores, you don't want to annoy them by then getting one of their competitors in who is not exclusive or is taking their share of wallet. So you just got to be quite careful in that space. But that's kind of the approach we're taking.
When you and I were talking, approaching today, some of the things you shared with me was the idea of shipping being a big part of your cost set. Yep. And how this could help change. Yeah, absolutely. I think, and anybody who around the world, it's one of the biggest problems that everyone has is how do you ship something to someone, at a reasonable cost. And if you're a low margin, low kind of discount retailer, the biggest cost you have is sending something to someone. So a lot of the time to pick and pack in a big distribution center, it's quite expensive, and unless it's completely all automated, it costs a fair bit of money. So if you've got slow moving stock that costs you a fair amount of money to pick, because it's, it could be like a $1 lollipop or a $2 lollipop, it becomes quite an expensive experience. So what Marketplace allows you to do, sometimes if you're working with a mid-tier company or one of the smaller companies, or even some of the big ones, they can actually pick and pack and ship something at a cheaper rate than what it is to pick and pack that from a big distribution center. So it actually makes it quite cost efficient. And we're probably seeing things like for an existing supplier where they may sell, a 10 pack of something,
they might want to sell a 100 pack and then ship it from their own 3PL. And they can work out their margin off that as well, so it's quite efficient for that. We would never hold the 100 pack of something that's big and bulky because it just wouldn't fit. But these guys are able to send it, at a really cost-efficient way through the marketplace.
That's good. What excites you about, what do you see over the next couple of years about what you're doing and how this would change or help the business? Like, are you finding, is the hope that you're going to move stuff from physical
Yep.
on into the marketplace that just because everybody's found it? And then are you going to identify stuff in the marketplace? Would you bring it in?
Yeah, I think there's probably two bits to that. It's a really good question, actually, and it's something when you and I were talking, it came to mind as well, is that if you're running 25,000 SKUs or more, you're going to have slow-moving lines that sit in your distribution center and take up space. So we have an intention to move some of those lines to marketplace. Things like electricals, where you might sell they might have a $300 retail price, and you might move, say, 5 or 6 a week. It just takes up a huge amount of space. So we're going to start to move some of those lines across to being on a marketplace. And that will be a bit of a phase, and that will free up the DC to have some more of the fast-moving stuff at a higher quantity. So I think that's probably the number one thing that I'd probably think about is what we're trying to do. Yeah.
That's interesting. So when I was at Nordstrom, one of the things when we launched is we created this thing called NordstromShoes.com, and it was really nothing more than a facet to Nordstrom.com, but I decided going live as Nordstrom.com is kind of a yawner. It's just another, quote, department store. That's what people think. They don't know that our mastery for many, many years was shoes, and that at one time our store one in Seattle was the world's biggest shoe store. So we created NordstromShoes.com. Amazon was just down the street, and we were the world's biggest shoe store. And what we did is a 3-tier supply chain. We had always in stock fashion items that we always carried and bought into, right? Fashion, seasonable items. And then we literally went out and taught Kenneth Cole Haan how to drop ship and pick, pack, and ship a single item. They never had done it. Then we had this middle layer, right? And the middle layer was, you can't get that right, we'll hold it. When we sell it, we'll charge it, we'll own it and roll through it. And of course we're Nordstrom, so we had some swagger. They all were trying to learn the business and et cetera. But I tell you that because at stores, my next question is, are you going to lever it at stores? At stores at Nordstrom, you used to walk in, and if they saw you, they'd say, hey, Mrs., ma'am, we don't have that in that size. Let me call a couple stores. And they would call the stores, and that store would have to run around and find it and do a shoe check, and it was really inefficient. So what we told the stores was, just go in the back, and look, they didn't have technology in the back. Most stores didn't back then. So we wired all the stores and put in literally an internet device back there so they can go on and check supply and tell Mrs. Smith, do you want it shipped to the store? And we had 20 million pairs of shoes online. And when we told that story, it was funny, after conferences like this, I'd have the tech vendors, I'd have the press, and then I'd have a group of women. All they wanted to do is talk about shoes, right? But what we were able to do is empower our stores with the supplies that we had out there. So now somebody walks into Chemist Warehouse and they're looking for that cord that you've now moved online. Are your stores going to be helping facilitate that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I mean, it's something we've had to go through a really big change management piece with. And we've deliberately taken our time with it as well to try and train everybody. But you're right, I think we've got a really good process in place where if someone, especially for range extension, where you might, someone comes in and said, hey, I want to get this, this product, the guys can look it up. They'll see whether it's, in the inventory, and if it will say marketplace, they'll be able to say, hey, go online and you're going to be able to get this product, quite easily as well. Yeah.
It's good. So let's talk about the user experience for the customer that's online shopping Chemist Warehouse today, right? You have owned product that's in your warehouse, and then you have third-party seller. So what always interests me is how and why a company that's adopting marketplace strategy and technology, how and why they decide to dial up or dial down the apparent that is coming from a third party. Because sometimes it's good, sometimes it doesn't work well for your brand. What are you doing and why, and what do you see out there broader beyond you that helped you make that decision?
Yeah, there's probably a couple of things here. I think we won't work with everybody. That's probably the first thing that I'd say. So we're not going to be a mass marketplace with thousands and thousands of sellers who can onboard themselves. We've kind of taken the approach of having an integrated marketplace and be very cautious about who we work with. We obviously test the products quite intricately and to make sure they have good quality and meet all the standards and stuff like that. Because irrespective of whether the seller is responsible, you, as the retailer, you still have to take some kind of ownership of that. But I think our approach is realistically, it's going to be a very integrated approach where you may search for a product that we may hold in our normal inventory, and then there'll be marketplace items that come up there as well. So you really get an integrated shopping experience with the idea and the strategy, very simply, to get a larger share of wallet. And I think, we want to be a one-stop shop for health and beauty. And probably the other category that is Chemist Warehouse is known for its great pricing, great range. For you and your family, well, what about your pets? So that's the other one we're thinking about as well, is about how you have that exchange. So you don't have to go to 2 different retailers to do all your shopping. You do it all in one spot, one transaction, and it's just...
And I assume you're just going to be experimenting with different categories.
Absolutely.
And the cost of doing it's limited?
Yeah, that's right. And the advantage of any marketplace, depending on what model you take, we've taken the approach of the only cost as a seller you'll have is your commission rate that you pay on the sale. So the risk is limited for the seller, because realistically, all they've got to do is get their products up. But if they don't sell anything, they don't pay anything. So it almost becomes like a free advertising thing for them. We integrate all the payment costs in the commission rate as well. So we can get better rates than other retailers on things like Afterpay or Buy Now, Pay Later. So we integrate that into the cost of the commission. So it becomes quite a good deal for the seller. So they're willing to move on what those commissions look like. And it's quite a simple conversation and transaction to be able to think about, how you get the stuff in. But the integrated marketplace is something we specifically wanted, so that you have, as a customer, you have the experience of trying to find both marketplace and non-marketplace items. And that's deliberate. That's not what everybody does, but that's the approach we're going to take.
When you're, I want to go back because it wasn't clear to me unless I missed it. The seller experience, the customer experience. I go online and I see all these multiple products. As I'm going through the transaction, I select an item. How obvious is it? How much are you saying this is a third-party seller, or when and how do you do it? And then not just yourself. Did you see a variety of those out there? Of that UI, UX?
It's a good question. So to be clear, we are very clear that the item is a marketplace, and it's a marketplace item. It has a little badge on it that says marketplace. It has the seller's details as a part of the product page, and it has, if they want to contact the seller directly about the product, they can do that as well. So that is a very important feature. I think there are some other marketplaces out there where you might go to a URL and then you've got kind of 2 sides to the URL. One of them is obviously your normal retail store, and then there's the marketplace side of it. We didn't want that experience. I think we have enough, we have a lot of customers already who are very used to using our site. So we thought it would be much easier to integrate it in there. But there are examples out there where you keep it separate, and there's good reason for that. You can do either, but we've taken the approach of integrating it in with the thought that it will increase basket size, and your personalization and how you're able to kind of cross-sell stuff to people is is much better when you're in an experience where it's all integrated into the same thing. The other thing we're doing, which is kind of on the same topic, and it's an important thing if you're starting a marketplace, if you're selling a product that somebody else sells, which obviously retailers do, the most important thing that we're finding is that we're almost willing to look at a lower commission, so as long as we get the best price, because our brand promise is we have the best pricing. So if you're a marketplace seller with us, the most important thing is you don't want people to research on your site and then buy elsewhere. And if that goes into your Google Shopping or it goes out elsewhere, you want to be the cheapest there, because people, you know what we all do. We all search around for a product, we get the best product page, and then we find the cheapest price to buy it. So the most important thing as part of the strategy is, if you want to work with us, we even write it into our contracts, is you have to have the best pricing. Right. We want to be known as that, and that's our brand promise.
So you hit the word commission a couple times. Let's talk about that for a second. There's a margin that you get, a gross margin you get for stuff you inventory, and it's probably similar maybe for dropship. Maybe there's a little difference in it. How does this, without disclosing, maybe give us an example of where does marketplace seller commissions fall versus your traditional gross margin?
It's pretty favourable. That's probably what you'd say. And as a seller, you're not just buying the ability to sell a product. You're buying what is our audiences. You're buying our customer base. So it's kind of a good deal, both from a marketing point of view for you as a seller, but also it's kind of good for us in the same way as well. When you add up all the costs of a normal retailer, when you hold the stock, it doesn't move, it goes out of date. You've got to throw stuff away. You might be buying it on consignment. you've got to store it, you've got DC costs. There's a lot of things that eat up into the margin. So you might buy a product with, say, a 30% margin in your normal DC, or it might be more, it might be less. But you've got to start to negative things off that 30% or whatever it happens to be based on what your costs are. Marketplace is quite simple. It's basically one cost. It's a commission for the seller pays. The risk is that is the only thing. I mean, there are some terms you're able to negotiate, but realistically, it's a very simple model. It's a clip of the ticket with a cost per item sold.
That's interesting. In you manage the payments and et cetera outward, and it's good. And then returns. And I'm sorry, if you have a question, I know there's a couple mics that we can get, or just stand up. It's not that, there's a couple mics up there. We'll just keep going. I don't know if there's questions. And we got just a couple minutes left.
Cool. What was your question?
Good point, yeah. Seller commissions, payments.
Returns. So returns is something, it's a really good watch point. So if you've got 500 stores and you've got a marketplace and somebody buys some fitness equipment, they're automatically going to want to have to come back to that store to return it, right? They're going to send it back to us, irrespective of saying you need to deal with the seller. One thing we've had to put in place is that you will be able to return that marketplace item within reason to a store, and there's a process in place for it. Now that has a cost for us a lot of the time, but as a customer, you just want to be able to, you see that the customer thinks they're buying from you, which they are, but they have an expectation that you'll manage that. So we've kind of taken the approach of not necessarily advertising, but if someone takes back to a store for a return, we're happy to take that. And we have that in our contract of how we deal with the seller as well, is to say, if the return is sent to us by mistake, and you want that sent back to you, there's obviously a cost that comes off the commission. But returns is obviously a really big topic across the world at the moment about how quickly you can get something back, or it's a bit hard in pharmacy land. You can't necessarily return everything. So for marketplace items, it's probably more likely that when you start to get into some more retail-based items, that people will want to return them if they're the wrong size or those kind of things. So it's an important thing that we take up with our sellers. We want to make sure their returns policy is very quick and fast, and that's one of the pre's of working with us as well.
Do you, on your site, you mentioned this, you touched on it a little bit, I just want to ask, are the sellers able to, in essence, buy co-op or buy a better attribution on your site?
Yeah, absolutely. So like all big retailers, we offer marketing packages where we co-fund marketing. And we take the approach of that if you spend marketing money with us with paid media, it's a better use of your marketing dollars because we have more customers, better audiences, better data. So we're able to target and personalize offers to people a lot better. So we've already, in the conversations we've had with a few suppliers so far, they're willing to kind of give us the money to invest that they would usually do on their brand, and usually their lower and upper funnel stuff that they do. The other thing which we talked about, which is on the same thing, is that we've got a lot of people that come to us who want to work with us and get their items into physical stores. We're almost looking at the marketplace as a bit of a trial for these suppliers, like prove that you can make the sales. Then you may get a shelf in our store to be able to get from that. That's a really important thing that you can use to kind of vet someone if you're not sure about it, is what's the risk of putting them on the marketplace. It's really limited.
Very good. Well, Nick, I want to thank you. I can tell you got all the experience. We've had time. This is not the first time I've met Nick. We've had time together to talk. I realize your capabilities as an operator. I understand it's not a miracle just to get a marketplace done. That it takes good, thoughtful practice. But it's my excitement about this as the next big part of growth for commerce is it's a pretty simple thing to do. It's a new muscle. You need a partner that'll help you learn it, which will bring me around the corner too. Booth 81. 8100. If you haven't been to the innovation area, I don't know if you've been up there. But you go up and it's up in the corner. We have skylights, it's lit up, it's beautiful. Come meet the Aussie family that's there and our United States family that's there up at Marketplacer. They will explain a lot more of this, and it's it's a great people and great culture. I want to thank you for your time. Enjoy the journey here, and everybody travel safe today.
Thanks.